Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce, the Ukraine War News Update for the 11th of November 2023. In the UK, this is Remembrance Day, where we remember all those fallen troops and soldiers in conflicts that have taken place over history. It started really on Armistice Day in 1918, and we use that as a marker to remember those fallen. And as I talked about in my live stream yesterday with Tim White, I put up a flag on my front window, Ukrainian flag actually. I will obviously be remembering those fallen in the British Armed Forces, but it's important to remember those fighting for democracy around the world in different conflicts outside of our own immediate sphere of nationality. Anyway, on with where I normally start, which is the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find those caveats in the description to this video below. Right, 1,130 personnel lost is a massive number. I mean, this is up to record numbers. And we can see a really big uptick in other categories. So yesterday, if you remember, it was fairly high personnel losses, but then it dipped down to pretty low numbers in tanks, APVs, and artillery and other categories. Well, we've just got high numbers across all the categories. So 25 tanks. It's just a huge loss. I mean, as I keep saying, the UK were to lose 25 tanks in one day. That's basically our tank battalion's done. You know, we're off back home. So 25 in one day in a 2-year war, and to still keep on going, just shows how many tanks the Russian army has or had. 24 APVs, another huge loss in that category, and 38 artillery systems. So the Ukrainians are dealing inordinate amounts of damage to the Russian capacities in these categories on a daily basis. And although you might argue about the accuracy of these figures, the trends, I think, tell you something. And even if you took sort of 30% off these figures and say, well, you know, 1 in 3 of these are not being destroyed, or you're inaccurate, or it's propaganda or whatever, you still have phenomenal losses for the Russians. 38 artillery systems is just absolutely huge. 2 multiple launch rocket systems, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 25 drones and 1 cruise missile. That's not from last night, but from the night before, I would have thought. 2 warships, so now they're including those Smyrna Project 11770 landing craft, where we're pretty sure satellite imagery shows that one was definitely sunk, the other I think they tried to save and then sunk. That also caused a loss. It is rumored of I think a BTR, so armed personnel carrier type vehicle, and a Tor air defense system on board those. So pretty bad losses for the Russians there. 49 vehicles and fuel tanks is a huge number. So logistically, the Russians are being hammered, and 9 pieces of special equipment that will be almost certainly skewed towards electronic warfare and ISR equipment as opposed to excavators and other kind of random bits of stuff, because it definitely seems that the Ukrainians are aiming for that electronic warfare stuff to make sure that they have a better chance of succeeding, say, across the river in Dnipro. Right, let's look and see what Andrew Perpetua, the mapper, has to say with regard to losses here. And he tots up the losses that he sees on the socials on a daily basis. You can see that there's just a phenomenal list of losses here. These are kind of verified losses. When you look at the General Staff figures, that they are not going to be represented one for one by social media video feed evidence. Okay. I don't know what the stats would be, but whether you'd see, I don't know, a quarter of the stuff claimed to have been blown up here, seen somewhere online. So when it comes to someone like Andrew Perpetua, it's one, is he picking up all the bits of footage that exist that have been released yesterday on all the social media platforms? Well, obviously no, by his own self-admission. 2, are each side going to be releasing all of the footage that they have? No, he's talked previously, or Konstantin talked on his live stream, on Andrew's live stream, about how he came across one guy that he had fundraised a drone for, who he hadn't been in contact with months. He said, "Oh, do you want some footage of the drone? the drone activity I've been responsible for. And Constantine went, oh yeah, sure. He said, well, here, and he had like 100 bits of drone footage that hadn't been released at all. He hadn't released any to anyone. And so therefore there is an awful lot of footage out there in different units and different people that will not be seen online at all. It doesn't exist online, but they will be giving their stats into their seniors that will then compile, as it goes up the chain, someone then compiles all of these on a daily basis. So that still happens even if the evidence isn't out there. Anyway, it's not stuff I haven't told you already before, but sometimes I need to reiterate this. So what we try and do from looking at stats like this is see, does this justify a belief that these general staff figures are at least somewhat accurate? And I think routinely they do. Right. So what's been lost? Let's look at the Ukrainian stuff first. Well, we have a couple of bits of artillery, just an unknown self-propelled gun there, a few tanks, a few IFVs, a truck, a couple of MRAPs, and some pickup trucks. So, yeah, I mean, mainly drones taking out a normal kind of spectrum of stuff, not too high value, to be honest. There's nothing there that I think, when you look at the tanks, yeah, T-64s, T-72, an unknown one. When you look at the IFVs, YPR 765, that's a Dutch configuration, Dutch variant of the M113, so those are pretty old. Now let's look at the Russian losses. You've got two landing ships. Well, straight away, those two landing ships probably take up the value of pretty much a whole of the Ukrainian equipment there, or near enough, especially when you think that they've got two bits of kit on board that I don't think are included in the list here. So, and I think they are somewhat rumoured. Anyway, surveillance and comms equipment, Pole 21, so that's fairly high value surveillance and comm equipment there. A couple of Miron Ps. We've got another boat, some artillery, including a Grad multiple launch rocket system, a couple of tanks, T-72 and an unknown, and then IFVs, the usual list of IFVs, some BTRs, BMPs, and APCs as well, and then a huge number of trucks and civilian vehicles like Bukankas, these loaf Scooby-Doo vans. Huge amount of trucks. Now, partly those trucks might be down to, and you can see there, 49 vehicles and fuel tanks. So we know that there were a series of HIMARS strikes at a truck accumulation in the Kherson region just behind the river, where I think the Russians were going to support some of their defensive activities there. And the Ukrainians hit them with, I think, do I have that here? I'm pretty sure. Yes, here it is. So today, Ukrainian artillery targeted a column of 11 Russian vehicles, like in good old times, left bank of Kherson. Says P-Star 11 here. And although I'm not going to show you for obvious reasons, you can go and check out the description below where you can see all this kind of footage. It will be listed there. But they lost a lot of equipment and troops by the looks of it in that HIMARS strike, and that will go some way to being reflected in this heavy list of truck and civilian vehicle losses there. Right, just trying to piece together information to see if I can justify belief that, they are losing lots of troops and equipment. Here we have some footage coming from a hospital in Kapichivka village in Luhansk. So this is up in the northern area of the front line. Hospital's a bit full, but things could be worse. They could be waiting for HIMARS in the fields. Well, I just want to show you what a typical hospital kind of looks like. Obviously, it's a long video. But you can see they've just rammed it full of bunk beds, and it's incredibly full. And I can't imagine it's the cleanest, most sterile environment, with lots of injured troops. See, this guy's had a grenade exploding his shoulder. Amazingly, miraculously, it didn't affect my neck, fracture my shoulder. Show me how you're treated. Just a bit of plaster, nothing else. He says, how's it treated? Yes, it's just stupid plaster, nothing else. They've just done real minimal, no injections, nothing, real minimal. This is what we have. This is called a hospital. So these guys are being really critical of the hospital provision, and yeah, it looks pretty bad there, with an awful lot of injured people getting very basic provision. So here, outside, they have a wash basin. I mean, look at this. This is their hospital provision. Outside wash basins, outside shower. An outhouse for a toilet. This is not. This is a 23rd year, the 21st century says, and so on and so forth. So the hospitals around, or at least I don't even know that this is a hospital. This is just some set up in a village, but it's really, really low on medical quality there. Right, moving on. Commander-in-Chief Zaluzhny has called the Russian offensive near Avdiivka disastrous. Although, if you listen to Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night, it is disastrous. It has been disastrous for the Russians, but the writing, at least as far as Andrew is concerned, is on the wall for the Ukrainians, as far as the Russians will probably take Avdiivka, short of some massive intervention. It might take 3 months, might take longer, might take shorter, but that gradual incremental territorial gain for the Russians is not looking good for Avdiivka. They don't have to take that much land in that pincer, in that neck, in order to really effectively cut off Avdiivka as a whole. It all broadly is. I mean, that road going into Avdiivka from the west is under some sort of fire control, and so therefore it's incredibly difficult, and it's not looking. It's a bit like Bakhmut. Once they were in Bakhmut, you're thinking, well, this only goes one way. And I think that's broadly the same. So I kind of agree with Andrew there. It is a fairly negative view on Avdiivka, but I don't know that it can go any other way. The way I see it with the Ukrainians is if only they had another 100,000 troops, they could commit to some serious counter-offensive actions. But I think they're just lacking in force quantity to be able to do all the things they want to do. So anyway, nonetheless, more than 100, this is from Zaluzhny himself, more than 100 tanks, 250 APCs and 50 artillery systems. So that is 400 bits of kit, as well as 7 Su-25 fighters were either destroyed or heavily damaged, as well as 10,000 fighters being killed there. So the personnel loss and the equipment loss, he claims, is huge in that area. Again, is that accurate? Do we have a sense that he's talking the truth or being a bit propagandistic? I don't know. It's difficult to say whether he's being entirely accurate, but actually we have documented visual evidence of at least 200 of those 400 bits of kit being taken out. And so therefore, are we justified in believing those claims? I think we are somewhat justified, for sure. Ukrainian first-person view drone operators have eliminated another Russian drone operator on the eastern bank of the Dnipro River, this time in the town of Dnipryani. I mentioned this yesterday, but in my front line, just to say that, this is the kind of activity that is taking place routinely particularly along the Dnipro River, which is that anti-electronic warfare and anti-drone, these countermeasures that the Ukrainians are putting in place in order to enable them to commit to successful offensive operations there. So recently, Ukraine, as the military lab says here, has deployed some of its best drone units in the Dnipro front, resulting in a complete dominance in the drone warfare over the Russian-controlled areas of the left bank of the river. So this is a concerted effort, and they are I think getting some rewards for their efforts in that context. So what else do we have? This is one of these montage videos that I'm not going to play for you, but it shows how incredibly dangerous first-person view drones are. So there's just a huge number of bits of kit being taken out by first-person view drones here, but also, flying into the back of lorries, trucks full of troops, and hitting trucks with hitting IFVs, or APCs with troops all gathered on top. like the loss of life, but also loss of equipment, and just, I mean, they don't always, even when they hit the top of these vehicles with troops on top, they don't necessarily kill all these troops. They fall off and then run away. But just the incredible prevalence of first-person view drones on the front lines now. They're just everywhere and causing all sorts of damage. Of course, this happens both ways. So don't just look at this and think, well, aren't the Ukrainians doing really well? When you go back to Andrew Perpetua's list and you look at how the Ukrainian stuff is getting destroyed, it's predominantly drones, Lancets or first-person view drones. You've got an artillery there and an ATGM. But other than that, that's 2 out of broadly all the rest being drones. I mean, there's a couple of unknowns. And when you look at the Russian losses, there's an awful lot of drones here. There's, Gimler's there. But other than that, Gimler's down there. But other than that, it's drones. Just an awful lot of drones. So there's plenty of footage out there. That is, I think, is an interesting bit of footage to show how, goodness me, I wouldn't want to travel anywhere near the front line in or on a vehicle, given the drones seem to be just all over the shop. Right, then I've already shown you this Gimler's attack, the HIMARS attack or similar, on the troop and truck accumulation in the Kherson area. This is, as this map shows, a little bit back behind Kherson, or behind the Dnipro River. This is, I think, these troops, Russian troops, were trying to support counterattacking where the Russians had lost like part of an island to the southwest of Kherson, rather than any activity up near Krinky and whatnot. So there was quite a lot of activity along the length of the Dnipro, really, up until you get to sort of Novokakhovka. So, that is a big loss. And again, as I've said before, goes some way to justifying these kind of high figures that you see from the general staff. On the other hand, the Russian MOD has said within the last week, the Russian air defenses have shot down 8 airplanes, 32 HIMARS missiles, 12 Storm Shadow missiles, Storm Shadow Scalp missiles, and 2 Neptunes. Don't know how justifiable those claims are. My idea, I mean, people kind of laugh at these, as Dead District says here, it's not even funny. Nonetheless, they might have taken out some. I don't know. It just always seems somewhat unlikely that happens. Sorry, just moving around the screen randomly there for you, just for a laugh. Anything for shits and giggles. Right. Okay, moving on to strikes now. Distance strikes and whatnot. Overnight, Russia has attacked Ukraine with Shahed drones and missiles. In total, 19 out of 31 Shahed drones were destroyed. Russia also launched the Kh-31, P-800 Onyx and S-300 towards Ukraine. So these are missiles, particularly the Onyx missile, S-300s as well, very difficult to shoot down with ballistic trajectories, rather than cruise missiles that are flying quite low and somewhat slower than a ballistic missile that will come down very quickly at a steeper angle, much more difficult to shoot down. Consequences of the hits are still being determined, so news will come out about these. As you can see, 19 out of 31 means that there's still 12 drones got through to whatever targets they were aiming at. I don't know where all the hits took place, or where even they concentrated last night, the Russians. Their attacks, according to the Kyiv Independent, killed 4 and injured 15 over the past day. Russian forces attacked at least 10 oblasts over the past day, killing at least 4 and injuring 15. So there is a variety to the targets, at least geographically, that the Russians were going for. Over the last 24 hours, an explosion was reported yesterday in Poltava, which is the city itself, so Tim White, not the Mirorod or its airfield. So there's an airfield there that's often targeted by the Russians, but it appears that the city itself was targeted. Don't know anything else about that. Ballistic aerial target, so that's probably I don't know exactly which missile that was, but a ballistic missile, one of the ones I just mentioned, was launched towards Kyiv at 8 a.m. today, so that's this morning. and by preliminary information, it was an Iskander actually. So that won't be included in those missiles from last night. This is significant because it's the first time in 52 days this has happened. So the target was destroyed by air defense, according to head of Kyiv Regional Military Administration. First missile attack on Kyiv in 52 days. So the Russians have pulled back from attacking Kyiv with missiles because they get taken down. 100% of them get taken down. So there's no point attacking Kyiv with just a few missiles on a regular basis, as they have been doing. What I think you might see going forward, if they've been stockpiling significantly, you might see, so this is maybe testing out Kyiv, you might see a big wave of both drones and missiles sent at Kyiv. If that does happen, however, I wonder how the international community will react. If Russia is seen to throw a massive wave at a capital city of Kyiv, whether that be counterproductive, and whether that will actually wake people back up to the war in Ukraine. That's the problem Russia have. At the moment, you say Israel and Palestine is strangling the bandwidth, the information space. So, Ukraine isn't on the map, so to speak, in terms of news reporting. But as soon as Russia do something significant, then it gets back on the map and you get people reacting against what Russia are doing. So that's a little bit of a dilemma for them, but they probably won't care either way. By preliminary information, there was no damage or casualties. Russia has accumulated stockpiles of missiles and is starting to repeat last year's scenario, hoping to destroy Ukrainians' civilian infrastructure before the winter's low temperature. Now, on the flip side of that, or as an answer to that, I thought this was interesting. So Ukraine may attack the Russian oil and gas infrastructure if Moscow intensifies shelling of the Ukrainian power system this winter, says Energy Minister Herman Halushchenko in an interview with Politico. Interesting non-capitalization of Moscow there. I know people are doing Russian Federation, not capitalizing that. I wonder if that is purposeful by Flash News there. But anyway, we might see that happen in reverse, and I think that could be quite something to see, actually, and whether that will have an effect on Russia in any way, in any meaningful way, and maybe public sentiments within Russia. I don't know. As I discussed with Tim White on a live stream, that can go either way. If you start hitting targets within Russia, you can either have Russians go, oh my goodness, I don't want this war coming to me. Oh, this is the reality of war. This is horrible. Putin, please stop the war. I didn't realize it involved actual people dying and people I know and whatever. That could happen, but I think it's more likely that people will entrench in a nationalistic unity. So if you start hitting targets within Russia, they're much more likely to go, although not 100% sure, but I think they're more likely to go, oh my goodness, right, those evil Ukrainians can't believe it, and fall into that propagandistic state TV narrative, and see that attack on them as a genuine attack on the Russian Federation, and therefore I'm with you, Putin, in anything you do against the Ukrainians. Nonetheless, we might see some of this oil and gas infrastructure being hit, and that is huge because that is where Russia is getting their money from. That is the primary source of funding for this war. And if Ukraine can hit that in a really significant way, then Russia might end up being in a little bit of trouble. Now, unfortunately, a lot of that infrastructure that is involved in the export of that is much further over to the east of Russia. And Russia's a massive country. The chance of Ukraine being able to do that damage over to the east is very minimal. So it might have to be hitting places like Novorossiysk on the Black Sea, places in districts, in oblasts nearer to Ukraine. And I don't know how big the effect on the Russian export of hydrocarbons that would have. Anyway, Ukrainian armed forces drones have attacked an oil depot in Feodosia. Oh look, I've got this in some kind of sensible order for once. The debris detonated. Now, actually, this I think happened before the strikes on those two landing ships, but I didn't really report this. And I think reporting from Ukraine's video was largely about this, about how they were kind of maybe distracting over here by hitting an oil depot and then hit the landing craft. Although the landing craft where they were in Chornomorska, where they were moored, the drones seem to get in there no problem and do the damage without an issue. So I don't know for the Russians whether that's something they'll need to be thinking about going forward. On the night of November the 10th, 2 aircraft-type drones attempted to attack the marine oil terminal in occupied Feodosia. One of the drones exploded in the air. The debris fell into a field 400 meters from the oil depot. The second drone fell in the territory of the oil depot and detonated when it fell. As a result, the metal structure of the building of one of the local electrical substations was damaged. So that is, well, I don't know whether that's according to the Russians explicitly, like buzzer there, and that could be a very charitable interpretation of what happened, or that is indeed what happened. I don't know. I don't know the details of that Feodosia attack. But, that is oil infrastructure, just as was being mentioned. Right. Tim White then, many people talked about this. This was a really significant event last night. It seems Ukraine has launched a concerted drone attack on Russia. This is said to be from Kotovsk in the Tambov area, though I've not yet been able to verify the footage. It is said to be a gunpowder factory. I mean, everyone is basically saying that is exactly what was hit. Following on from the previous post, he says later, the explosion has happened in Kotovsk and does look to be the gunpowder factory, but whether a drone struck it is not yet 100% confirmed. Russia says a fire at the gunpowder factory in Tambov region, south of Moscow, has already been put out. However, residents of Kotovsk report hearing an explosion before the fire. Local media report the 5th workshop exploded. It may not be a drone, but big coincidence if not. Who knows what hit that? But the fire does look significant, and being put out so quickly, I don't know whether the Russians had done that, but they've reported that. But this is exactly what you want, which is hitting military-industrial complex infrastructure as well as hydrocarbons. This, put the pressure on the Russians at source in the same way that I think they should be trying their hardest to hit Russian airfields still. And I'm sure they're working super hard to get drone capability in order to do that. But of course, the Russians will have their very best air defenses around those airfields. You would think, although Engels Air Base and other air bases, Sukhov in the northwest of Russia have been hit, and successfully so. And so, what air defense doing? Right, Skadovsk. I reported this yesterday. I'm not going to show you this, but I reported, was it yesterday or the day before? Skadovsk was hit. This is a place in the south of the Kherson occupied territory. This is a place where the Russians have had command and control for a long time there, for over a year, and they keep getting hit and moving their personnel from one side of the Skadovsk to the other in different places, and then that gets blown up. And then it was hit again, I think, in the center of Skadovsk. And the Russians claimed that it was a hit on civilian infrastructure and civilians died as a result. But unfortunately, I mean, this is why we shouldn't trust what the Russians say and why I don't tell you what the Russians say, because they routinely lie. And this is another lie, because then a Russian soldier released footage, and I can't show it to you, but it is there, and you can click on the link below, on the link in the description below to watch it, but then showed the rubble littered with Russian military personnel. And the claim was that this hit high-ranking military personnel and high-ranking officials, possibly. So those rumors, don't know if that's definitely true, but it definitely was military personnel, as you can see from the Russians' own footage of the dead bodies amongst the rubble of Skadovsk. Now, I talked about this with Tim as one of the super chat questions talked about this yesterday in the live chat, in the live stream, talking about railway sabotage. Now, less than 12 hours later, a really significant bit of railway sabotage has taken place. So an act of sabotage on a railway road took place in Russia's Ryazan region. 19 cars of freight train derailed. According to Moscow Railroad, it happened as a result of, quote, interference of unauthorized persons in the operation of railway transport. In other words, sabotage. Russian publics report partisans. So this is quite a big derailing. 19 cars is quite a lot, and what you can see there is fertilizer, as far as I can work out. That is what the claim is. 19 train carriages derailed as a result of an explosion on a railway track in Ryazan. Here, some more images and a video as well. This is not going to do the Russian freight infrastructure any good, or logistics any good. As you can see, this is pretty dire. Although I don't know, is that a bit of bending? Yeah, actually there is some serious track repair needed. As I've said before, though, track repair doesn't take too long unless you do some significant damage to it, maybe in stations when you blow up carriages with fuel in, and that can maybe cause more sustained damage. But nonetheless, this is really good stuff for the Ukrainians. Derailed near Diaghilev station. 7 of them with mineral fertilizers inside fell on their side. So not all of them fell over, but 7 of the 19 and the rest were derailed. So that's significant sabotage, yeah. Good stuff. And moving on to other bits and pieces. So Russian facade of obedience is cracking, says Trentselenko in reference to Peacetale 1-1 claim here. So in occupied Crimea, mobilized Russians beat their colonel to death. The event took place on November the 1st, 2023 in this temporarily occupied Simferopol. A group of mobilized soldiers of the 20th Motorized Rifle Division, which is part of the 8th Army and Southern Military District of the Russian Federation, seriously injured Colonel Muzerbekov. Seriously injured or beaten to death. An officer of the occupation army held the position of deputy commander of the regiment. On November the 7th, the Simferopol hospital confirmed, so he was injured and then died, confirmed the death of Muzerbekov from his injuries. On the same day, the Russian servicemen suspected of murdering the colonel, disguised in civilian clothes, voluntarily left the location of their unit in Simferopol district and fled to the Krasnodar region of the Russian Federation. If that is true, it is just another sign that all things aren't well in the Russian army, that the conditions in terms of how the officers treat their subordinates, I mean, that's been documented an awful lot of times. We've seen drone footage of Russian officers beating their subordinates with sticks. We've seen video footage of complete humiliation of Russian soldiers by their officers. Things aren't good. And anyway, at some point, people snap, and in this case, they beat their officer to death and then do a runner. Right, all our, quote from the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Shmyhal, all our internal resources will be used to resist and defeat the enemy. So almost 50% of expenditures. So this year, we've had 30% of the budgets being spent on the war effort. Next year, that's looking like being 50% of expenditures in 2024. So we'll go to the defense and security of Ukraine. There will be even more weapons and equipment, more drones, ammunition, missiles. And of course, that's the sort of thing that I could have told you in the military aid segment next. Now, give me strength. Right. This makes me want to hit my head against the desk very hard, repeatedly, screaming expletives at Elon Musk. Anyway, note in what he says here, he doesn't mention Russia at all. It's all about having a go at Ukraine. As if Russia attacking Ukraine is like, yeah, that's all right. But why should Ukraine be sending their soldiers to their deaths?
Look, I think I would just recommend do not send the flower of Ukrainian youth to die in trenches. Whether he talks to Putin or not, just don't do that.
First World War. Second World War. Second World War. I suggest not sending British and French and American troops to die in Europe. Just don't do it. Just let Hitler win. Let Hitler win. Just let him win. Don't send the flower of your youth to die fighting for democracy, for freedom, for liberty, for moral goodness. Don't do it. Just let the bad guys win. Let them win. Let Hitler win. Let Putin win.
Whoever goes on the offensive will lose massive numbers of people. And history will not look kindly upon them. Look, I think I would...
Whoever goes on the offensive. So it's kind of like, I could include Russia here. But I was just talking about Ukraine. And basically saying Ukraine shouldn't attack the Russians is basically what you're saying there. I will squeeze your head. Squeeze your head. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate all your support. Please don't listen to people like him. Please try and listen to people like me. Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, take care. All the best. Speak soon. Doodle pips.